A monument larger in volume than any other known construction in the ancient Maya world was hiding in plain sight. Not beneath a mountain, not sealed inside a tomb. It was so broad that people could stand on top of it and mistake the ground beneath their feet for the landscape itself. For more than 3,000 years, Aguada Fénix kept its shape without giving away its full scale. Then lasers stripped away the visual noise of southeastern Mexico, and a platform nearly 1,400 meters long emerged from the terrain. It was built more than 1,000 years before the great dynasties of classic Maya cities reached their height. And the deeper archaeologists looked, the stranger the story became. There were no giant portraits of kings commanding the site, no royal tomb announcing the ruler who ordered the work, no obvious palace proclaiming where a supreme elite lived. Yet the builders moved more than 3.5 million cubic meters of material into the main plateau alone. Later estimates put the labor investment at roughly 10.8 million person days. So who convinced that many people to build it? For years, that question was the mystery of Aguada Fénix. Then researchers discovered that the enormous plateau was only the center of something even larger, a design stretching for kilometers across the landscape, a plan that may have turned the Earth itself into a model of cosmic order. And that changes the question. Perhaps these people were not building for a king at all. Perhaps they were building for an idea. Aguada Fénix lies in Tabasco, Mexico, near the western edge of the Maya lowlands, and not far from Guatemala. Its modern discovery did not begin with explorers hacking through untouched jungle in 2020. Researchers led by archaeologists Takeshi Inomata and Daniela Triadan began analyzing government LiDAR data in 2017, then obtained higher resolution airborne scans that revealed the site in extraordinary detail. Their first major report appeared in Nature in 2020. LiDAR measures the ground with laser pulses from the air. In places where vegetation, pasture, roads, and modern activity make ancient earthworks difficult to recognize, the data can expose subtle changes in elevation. At Aguada Fénix, those changes formed a geometry too large to appreciate from ground level. The main plateau measures about 1,400 meters by 400 meters and rises roughly 10 to 15 meters. 9 causeways radiate from the complex. Excavation and radiocarbon evidence initially placed the major construction between about 1,000 and 800 BCE. Continued work has since expanded the main period of building and renovation to roughly 1050 to 700 BCE. That date matters because the people living in this region were not supposed to look like the builders of a monument on this scale. Older models of Maya development often imagined a gradual sequence. Farming becomes more important, villages become more permanent, populations grow, rulers consolidate authority, and only then does monumental architecture appear. Aguada Fénix refuses to fit neatly into that ladder. Some of its builders probably still maintained a degree of residential mobility. Archaeologists have not found the kind of permanent residential concentration at the site that we would expect from a later Maya capital. And yet these communities were capable of organizing one of the most enormous construction efforts in pre-Hispanic Maya history. The main plateau contains an estimated 3.63 million cubic meters of construction fill. Earlier calculations produced a broader range of roughly 3.2 to 4.3 million cubic meters. Either way, its volume exceeded that of La Danta at El Mirador, previously considered the largest known construction in the Maya lowlands. It was not a stone pyramid piercing the sky. It was something almost opposite: horizontal monumentality, a colossal artificial stage spread across the earth. That choice of shape may be the first clue to the society behind it. Later Maya kings used height brilliantly. At places such as Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, and Copan, monumental architecture could separate rulers and ritual specialists from the crowds below. Stairways controlled approach. Elevated temples turned political hierarchy into physical experience. Power stood above you, literally. Aguada Fénix came much earlier, and its political world appears to have been different. The excavation team has found no clear evidence of the kind of marked inequality seen at major Olmec centers such as San Lorenzo and La Venta. There are no known colossal ruler portraits at Aguada Fénix. The stone imagery recovered there has instead included naturalistic subjects, including an animal. Later work also identified imagery connected with an ordinary human figure rather than a glorified monarch. But that does not prove a perfect egalitarian society. Archaeology rarely gives us something that clean. The researchers themselves now argue that community leaders probably existed. Certain people may have possessed prestige, specialized knowledge, and influence. What appears to be missing is evidence that those leaders had the overwhelming coercive authority of later divine kings. That distinction is more interesting than the claim that it was a utopia without rulers. Imagine the labor problem. The builders did not have draft animals hauling carts full of earth. Wheeled transport was not available for moving construction material. Iron tools did not bite into the ground. Clay, soil, marl, and other fill had to be extracted, transported, layered, leveled, and rebuilt by human labor. The plateau was not produced in a single frantic season. It accumulated through repeated construction episodes across generations. The estimated 8 million person days should not be imagined as 10 million people working once. It is a measure of labor, one person working for one day, multiplied millions of times. Even spread over decades, the commitment is staggering. More than 1,000 people may have participated in major phases of the project. Why would mobile or partly mobile communities keep returning to do this? The oldest answer was ritual. The newest evidence makes that answer much more precise. Between 2020 and 2024, archaeologists investigated features far beyond the main plateau. Their results, published in Science Advances in 2025, revealed that Aguada Fénix was organized around nested cross-shaped patterns. North-south and east-west axes extended outward through pairs of causeways and corridors. Farther away were canals and a dam associated with Laguna Naranjito. Taken together, the design reached roughly 9 kilometers in one direction and 7.5 in the other. This was not merely a large ceremonial platform. The researchers argue that the landscape itself was probably designed as a cosmogram, a physical representation of the order of the world. At the center stood an E group, a type of ceremonial arrangement found across ancient Mesoamerica. Its orientation may have marked sunrise around February 24th and October 17th. The interval between those dates is 130 days, half of the 260-day ritual calendar that became fundamental in Mesoamerican timekeeping. That connection does not mean we can reconstruct every ceremony performed there. We cannot. But it gives us something more powerful than speculation about an invisible tyrant. Time itself may have organized the gathering. People could arrive seasonally. They could participate in processions, rituals, feasts, exchanges, courtship, and construction. A monument this large did not simply consume labor. It created a reason for dispersed communities to become a community, even if only for part of the year. Then archaeologists found color at the center of the design. In a cruciform cache beneath the ceremonial precinct, researchers identified blue, green, and yellow pigments, along with red and yellowish shell materials. They interpret these as the earliest known directional color symbols yet documented in Mesoamerica. The blue pigment included azurite, another exceptionally early example for the region. These materials were not randomly discarded. They were placed within a cross at the symbolic center of a much larger cross-shaped landscape. The implication is difficult to ignore. Aguada Fénix may have been built as an ordered universe you could physically enter. Walk the causeway, and you were moving along an axis. Gather at the center, and you stood where directions met. Watch the horizon, and ritual time aligned human activity with a repeating calendar. Participate in construction, and you were not merely carrying earth. You were helping materialize a shared version of how the world was supposed to work. That is a form of power, even when no soldier is standing behind you. It is also where the comforting story of an egalitarian monument becomes darker and more complicated. Belief can coordinate people without chains. Prestige can command effort without a crown. Knowledge can create authority before authority becomes hereditary rule. The 2025 research does not claim that Aguada Fénix had kings comparable to the rulers of later Maya states. In fact, the absence of prominent social inequality remains central to the interpretation. But the authors propose that calendrical specialists and other leading figures probably held particular influence. Someone had to understand the observations, preserve the schedule, help define the geometry, organize gatherings, and persuade others that the design mattered. Those specialists may have lived at Aguada Fénix for longer periods, while other participants moved between the site and surrounding settlements. Their knowledge of the sky and ritual calendar could have earned respect. Their access to rare goods such as jade and imported pigments could have reinforced it. Not kings, not yet. But perhaps the social ingredients from which kingship could eventually grow. Aguada Fénix shows another path to large-scale organization: shared ritual, seasonal gathering, expertise, persuasion, and a common worldview. Hierarchy does not have to arrive before monumentality. It can emerge inside the systems created to make collective action possible. And Aguada Fénix contains evidence that collective ambition had limits. The builders did not finish everything they began. West of the central plateau, they constructed a dam and attempted an extraordinary network of canals. Some channels reached as much as 35 meters in width and 5 meters in depth. The hydraulic works represented about 193,000 cubic meters of excavation and construction, requiring an estimated 255,000 person days in their unfinished state. The intention appears to have been to connect water control with the Great Directional Plan. But several canals were never completed. In places, workers faced harder limestone beneath softer soil and marl. The project may have demanded engineering skills that the builders had not yet developed. Researchers note that laying out long horizontal axes with astronomical observations is one problem. Controlling subtle vertical gradients across kilometers of terrain is another. The unfinished canals preserve a rare moment when ancient ambition outran ancient technique. That failure matters. If Aguada Fénix were simply the product of an all-powerful regime, it would be easy to imagine orders passing downward until the work was finished. Instead, this enormous experiment depended on continuing participation. People had to return. They had to agree that the labor was worth giving. They had to keep believing in the ceremonies, the gatherings, the leaders, or the social benefits that held the project together. Eventually, something broke that cycle. Major construction and occupation at Aguada Fénix ended around 700 BCE in the newer chronology. The Great Cosmogram remained, but some of its most ambitious elements were incomplete. Small groups would return in later centuries, yet the extraordinary early building program was over. We do not know exactly why. That uncertainty is important, because the original temptation is to turn Aguada Fénix into a morality play. First there was freedom, then elites stole religion, then kings enslaved everyone. The real archaeological record is more dangerous than that, because it is less simple. Later Maya societies did develop hereditary dynasties, sharper social hierarchies, warfare between kingdoms, elite compounds, royal monuments, and rulers whose political authority was deeply entangled with sacred knowledge. But archaeologists cannot draw a straight line from one group at Aguada Fénix to the kings of Tikal centuries later. The builders of this early monument were part of a much wider network of cultural interaction, stretching between the Maya lowlands, the Gulf Coast, and neighboring regions. What Aguada Fénix gives us is not a documented moment when democracy died. It gives us a snapshot of something more fundamental: large-scale cooperation before obvious kingship, and possible specialists whose authority rested on knowledge rather than armies. That may be the real beginning of hierarchy. Power rarely announces itself for the first time with a throne. Sometimes it begins with the person who knows when the sun will rise at the sacred point. The person who knows which color belongs to which direction. The person who decides when everyone should gather, where the procession should move, what should be placed in the earth, and why the next layer of the platform must be built. None of that requires a crown. But once a society accepts that certain people stand closer to sacred knowledge than others, prestige can become privilege. Privilege can become inheritance. Ritual authority can become political authority. Centuries later, Maya rulers would present themselves not merely as administrators, but as essential actors in a cosmic order. Aguada Fénix may preserve an earlier stage of that process, when the structure was still horizontal, participation was still broadly communal, and leadership had not yet hardened into the royal institutions known from the classic period. And that returns us to the mystery hidden inside the earthwork. The most astonishing feature of Aguada Fénix is not that an ancient population could move millions of cubic meters of material without modern machines. Humans have always been capable of extraordinary labor. The astonishing part is that researchers have found no evidence that a pharaoh-like monarch had to command it. A shared calendar may have done part of the work. A sacred landscape may have done part of it. Feasting, trade, social connection, belief, prestige, and the simple human desire to belong may have done the rest. That makes the monument feel less alien, not more. Modern societies also follow calendars, institutions, networks, symbols, and stories that make collective action possible. Those systems can create extraordinary things. They can also concentrate authority in the hands of people who claim to understand them better than everyone else. At Aguada Fénix, the architecture does not show us a tyrant standing above the crowd. It shows us thousands of people standing on a platform they built together, inside a landscape that may have represented the universe itself. And somewhere among them may have been the specialists who knew how to read that universe. So what do you think held Aguada Fénix together? Shared belief? Social obligation? The authority of calendrical specialists? Or something archaeology can no longer recover? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe to the History Ledger and continue with us into the next ancient world, where power left its fingerprints in stone, earth, and memory. Because kings are easy to see once they build thrones. The harder story is discovering how people learned to obey authority before the throne existed. The ledger doesn't forget.